All right. Well, here we are, another episode of the American Legacy Podcast. And we have a special guest today, Derek Wood. Derek has a history of being in the Marines. Now you're the vice president of GARDAWORLD, which is a security-based company that is HQ'd out of Montreal, Canada, right? Is that?
Yeah, so the parent company is out of Montreal. So I work for one of the subsidiaries, which is GARDAWORLD Federal Services.
Okay.
So I'm the vice president of the country of Iraq.
Okay.
For our Department of State contract.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. And then I was reading a little bit about your history. Maybe you could shed some light on, where you were raised, born, and then a little bit about your life story, and then we can go from there.
Yeah. So my dad was a retired sailor at U.S. Navy, 22 years, retired as a senior chief. I was actually born on the West Coast. I was born in California, and then grew up as a Navy brat. My dad's last duty station was back in the Philippines, so that's where he met my mother in the 70s. Okay. And my last duty station was there, or his last duty station was there. We resided there for 2 years. Got evacuated when the volcano erupted in 1991. Wow. And I remember when we got evacuated, all the men and young boys had to get evacuated in the well deck, they call it, on this amphib ship. So for those that don't know, an amphib is the Navy's taxi service for Marines. Okay. So I'm hanging out in this well deck of the ship, and this is where all the LCACs are, the hovercrafts kind of stage, and the thing's wet. And I said, this would be kind of cool to.
And how old were you then?
Almost 16 years old at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Relocated to Maine. My dad retired. My grandmother, my aunt, my uncle had already relocated up here from Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and on into Maine. And then we ended up living in Stetson.
A
couple towns over, yeah. So
that's funny.
Traveled, the United States with my dad, even international travel with my dad, and then ended up in Stetson, and met some great friends though. But I was like, you know what, I gotta do something. I was a bit of a loose cannon, bit of a party animal in high school. So the only thing I could really probably do was active service. And then it took me back to the days of that day traveling that well deck where the Marines kind of typically hang out. And I said, you know what? So I'm not going to sit here and pump gas. I'm going to go on active duty. So I went in the Marine Corps.
On active duty.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. And so you picked the Marines just because of that experience from the Philippines. Because there's so many, everyone's recruiting. You want the Army, Navy, Marines. So it's like, if you're on the verge of enlisting, it's sometimes it gets a little confusing. Which branch am I going to?
So, typically naval installations then were guarded by Marines, right? They were always the sentries at the gates, when you gain access to those naval installations. Good friend of mine, his dad was a former full bird colonel in the Philippines, so I had some exposure there. It just led me to the Marine Corps.
Wow. So tell me about that. I'm curious. I'm a Canadian, so I mean I'm both now, but I just think we don't get exposed to the level of military options in Canada that you're exposed to in the U.S. And I just think when you enter in the Marine Corps, what happens?
And that you say that about the Canadian side of the house, our brothers and sisters in the North, but the Canadians have some great special forces operators, very very dynamic individuals. So my time in the Marine Corps, enlisted, like I said, right after I graduated high school, went to school over in Central and East Corinth, graduated high school in 93. And then by November of that year, I was actually down at Parris Island, South Carolina. Did a few years in what we call the Fleet Marine Force, right? That's like our regular Marine Corps. And this was during the Clinton administration, so there wasn't a lot of, large-scale activity going on worldwide. So I kind of got bored sitting in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and went on embassy duty, it's called. So Marine Security Guard duty. In the fleet, Marines typically refer to it as, or commonly refer to it as embassy duty. Okay. So that put me at 3 different embassies around the world after I graduated from, the basic course down in Quantico, Virginia. A lot of attrition in that course. Not a lot compared to BUDS or anything like that, the SEAL teams.
Right.
But it's largely just due to the level of clearance you need. As a young person, you may have a lot of debt. You may have had something in your background that kind of disqualified you from receiving a clearance. So you have to have a pretty, clean background. Yeah. So made it through the course and then went over to Lima, Peru, Algiers, Algeria, and then Stockholm, Sweden.
Wow.
Yeah. So you're still, administratively connected to the Marine Corps, but you're OpCon or administratively, operationally connected to the State Department.
Okay. All right. Interesting. Yeah. No, it's I always think so. I guess you're armed outside of an embassy. I'm just thinking physically, you're basically an armed man outside of an embassy protecting the embassy essentially, or is it more?
Yeah, it's a little bit different than that. Yeah. So on embassy duty specifically, we actually are the internal security of the embassy. Okay. So we're doing access control, ensuring the proper storage of classified information, conducting inspections to ensure that that's being upheld. But basically our job is to preserve, enforce, and protect, Okay.
Yeah. All right. Interesting. Yeah. So looking back at your 21 plus years of program and operations leadership, what core principles have guided your decision-making, whether in the Marines or now that you're in corporate leadership? Like how do you run the ship, if you will?
You have to trust your people. You have to have good people in place. Fortunately, the program I'm on now, there's a huge screening process to get into the upper levels of management. So the program that I'm managing right now, actually, we have 2 sites. So on each of those sites, it's led by an individual project manager, and then he has a few deputies under him. But in order to get to that level, you have to have the background that the State Department actually approves you for that position, and then there's also a key leadership approval process. Okay. So just because the individual might meet the background, that might not actually allow them still to fill that position. Okay. But then once they do get there, right, it's just trusting your people, right. Establishing the intent of what you want accomplished, letting them, free flow into to get that accomplished, whatever that might be, and then sometimes you have to, there's an old term, you have to, in business school you have to measure, and if you can't measure, you can't manage.
Right. That's true. Yeah. For sure. Yeah, you have analytics or some sort of metric that you're targeting, and then you hold people accountable to the metric. And yeah. So with the new vice president role inside of this new security-based company, or the division that you're working for, responsible for, what do they do? What is it like? What is it that you're offering?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, our parent company, GARDAWORLD, and there's a really unique story there too. You being a Canadian, right? You should. I challenge you to look into that a little bit, because I'm going to check it out. It's a great story. The original founder started the business with a $25,000 home equity loan, and grew it into this $6 billion conglomerate that it is today. That's insane. Yeah, and he started off just by moving cash, kind of like the Wells Fargo trucks. Yeah, right. So GARDAWORLD Cash Services was his first business, I think, that he started, and he could do it just quicker, better, cheaper.
Right. So he buys a fleet of secured trucks, and we pick up cash at banks or at businesses, and we move it around the city. And interesting.
So the federal services side of the house is the cleared arm of GARDAWORLD, right? So we, specifically focus on federal, state, and local contracts. Okay. We like I mentioned, we're the cleared arm, right? We're the cleared U.S. arm. So we are what's called a FOCI, mitigated business, right? So foreign owned control. I can't remember what the I stands for, but basically we can't be owned by a foreign entity. Okay. But the way that the company is structured with firewalls, we can actually bid and perform U.S. cleared work too.
Okay, all right, interesting. And then how did you? I was thinking about, like, you had some experience in the Marine Corps, going around managing these embassies. How did it shape your leadership style and your approach to, like, high pressure situations?
Yeah, that's a good question. We were actually the company just did a segment during Veterans Week, and they asked some very similar questions. So the Marine Corps teaches its leaders or its people, right? Yeah. Teaches Marines to lead at the lowest levels. You may have a guy that's the same rank, right? Let's take like a lance corporal. It's one of the lower.
Okay.
We call them, well, back in my day, we used to call them non-rates. I don't think that they call them that anymore. But you're not an NCO. You're not a non-commissioned officer. And you could have two lance corporals, and each one they're the same rank, and each of them will know who the senior man is, and you honor that. The guy, this one guy may have been promoted 1 month before you. Well, you're going to go ahead and he's the guy that's going to listen. And it's very when you instill leadership at the very lowest level, right? It doesn't matter what happens to the guys at the top, as long as the intent, right? The commander, we call it the commander's intent, is clearly articulated and discussed during your pre-mission briefings. The whole top of the head shed or the whole top of your organizational structure could get taken out, and that lowest level still knows what the intent is, and they're still going to go ahead and accomplish the objective. Exactly.
Those things. That's interesting, because it's like the way I think about leadership in that good leaders also are good followers as well. You feel like there's times when you follow and there's times when you lead, and I think in that case, being very specific about what you're trying to accomplish, so there's no ambiguity, and therefore the people that are doing the job have the tools, have the knowledge, and are able to execute the task, and then you have metrics in place to kind of manage and to that. Interesting. What's a moment from your military career that permanently changed the way that you view or leadership in general? Is there any specific thing that happened while you were in the Marine Corps that kind of was like, okay, that
I can't recall any one individual moment, but I think that the one thing I think that separates the Marine Corps from the other branches, and something that a lot of Marines, former Marines, whatever we want to call them, Marines that are not on active service anymore, is you're always a Marine, right? So
it's quite a brotherhood. It's quite a brotherhood. I mean, it's even though all of them, but I mean the Marine Corps specifically. I mean, it seems like that's a little bit of an elevated version of a brotherhood. I don't know. That's from my perspective.
It truly is. We still celebrate the Marine Corps birthday at a level that no other branch of service does.
Right.
If you go to any Marine, even if that individual is not a stellar Marine on active duty, they can tell you exactly when the Marine Corps birthday is, right? And they're usually the first ones that are celebrating it.
Yeah, right, of course. Yeah,
because once you kind of claim that title,
right,
it's with you forever. No one can take it away from you.
That's it.
Yeah,
that's exactly right.
Yeah. So I try to, especially now in my elevated role, I try to always at least, carry myself in a manner that someone says, oh yeah, I could tell he was a Marine, or that's not a surprise to me that the guy's a Marine. He's still in shape. He still walks with his head held high. He still leads like he's on active duty, so. That's
good. I like that. I think that I always think about it in that, leading by example, really. I mean, it's hard to tell people on your team to do certain things if you're not willing to do it, or if you haven't been there and done that. So it's like if they see that you're telling them to run miles, and you're 50 pounds overweight, sitting there eating Cheetos, and you're telling them that it's really important for people to take their physical health seriously, it doesn't have a lot of weight. So that's interesting. Yeah. You've built a reputation for executing strategic initiatives with precision. What processes or systems do you rely on to keep your teams aligned and on task?
So I actually have a certification in project management. It's called the PMP, right? It's a certificate that's sponsored through the Project Management Institute, and within there, there's there's what's called the RACI matrix, or the RACI.
Okay.
Right? It's a matrix. It's a square. When you look at stakeholders and individuals that are contributing to, to a process, there's the two that are probably the most important, right, are those that are responsible, right? That's the R in RACI, and then those that are accountable, right? And there's a fine line, right, or a true distinction on who actually is responsible, who's accountable, because you can go ahead and delegate responsibility, but you can never delegate accountability. And at the end of the day, right, the individual that's accountable is the one that has to follow through with it or own the mistakes.
Right.
You know, the again, a while back, I don't know if it's still politically correct to say this, but it used to be the throat to choke matrix.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
If this goes to hell,
Where's the ball drop?
Right.
Yeah.
right, whose throat are we choking?
Right.
So I've always made sure that that was clearly defined in anything I did as far as project management, program level management.
Right.
That at the end of the day, I'm the one that's ultimately accountable.
Right.
Right. I'm going to share the responsibility with all of you. I'm going to task you guys individually to help out. But at the end of the day, know that it lies with me at the end of the day.
Right.
Exactly. Okay. The success or failure of the program is inevitably on me as the leader. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It's like leadership is like you do own a lot of the weight of the responsibility of whether it's a success or failure. And yeah, I think and you know that there's a lot of weight associated with leadership because you know of that. Really. Yeah. Yeah. So and I know that you've led a couple Kaizen value stream mapping events, and one of the things like whether it's manufacturing or people processes, you know, what's the biggest misconception leaders have about continuous improvement? Like,
You know, I think that a lot of folks, especially when it comes to like, Lean Six Sigmas, I think, everything has to be this full blown, continuous improvement initiative, right? Where we have to spend a lot of money in order to get any kind of return on investment. And I don't think that's always the case, when you take a look at this manufacturing facility, right? Everybody in here should be some sort of champion for continuous improvement. And I think that that's a culture, right? That can be that has to be one fostered by those above. And you can do that in a bunch of different ways. But again, once you have that culture, put in place, again, it's the continuous improvement, effective change management. It has to be adopted by everybody, or else it's not going to. I think once you do that, right, you'll start to see some efficiency, that actually translates down to the bottom line on the P&L or something.
yeah, no, I think that's true. I mean, the people that are on the floor in front of the stuff every day, they're the ones that are seeing the potential improvement. And if you have a culture that's I'm just doing this little thing that it's in my box, and I'm not swivel heading around looking for opportunities, then you're never going to get that fed up. Or if things get fed up and there's more of a disciplinary thing happening instead of, no, we want the data to come in and having an open path. But culture is so difficult, and it takes a long time to change the culture. It's like, are there things that you feel based on your experience that can help improve or accelerate culture development?
I think it's starts with communications and engagement from the top, right? We mentioned my travel overseas. Every time I go overseas, I'm having multiple, we call them town halls, right? Multiple town hall events just to talk to the people so that they no longer see me as just some guy on the website, on the corporate website that's a vice president level individual. He's just over here, shaking hands and kissing babies.
Right.
I get down to the lowest levels, and that's just through dialogue.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think that's the one thing that has to be established. And then again, back to what I've referred to as what we used to call in the Marine Corps commander's intent. It's articulating the message like, hey, this is why we're doing this stuff. This is why we need to do it, and this is how I'd like to see it done. And then let your people go. Right. There are some, with Lean Six Sigma, there are some formal training initiatives that have to take place, right? So everybody kind of knows what they're looking at, kind of understands the methodology, the background, why it works.
Big picture
context stuff, why it works. That's right.
Six Sigma is all about. Yeah. No, that's yeah. No, I feel like when you're trying to improve those processes, I think transparency. At least when I was in corporate America, I think a lot of times, if you have these initiatives or these strategic plans that are in place, and if you don't bring the entire team in so that everyone sees the big picture and understands, why am I doing this, it's hard for them to get buy-in, and without buy-in, chances of it being successful are not high, because there'll be some, and it may not be an intentional sabotage, but it's just the chances of it being successful are not high.
Yeah. the opportunity for it to take off gets hindered. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. What has been your toughest leadership challenge, whether it's team related, cultural, operational, and how did you break through that?
You know, so after I got done contracting the first time, I actually broke into the manufacturing space. Started off in paper, so a bit of a process manufacturing, and then got into discrete manufacturing, actually right down the road from here in Pittsfield, working for United Technologies.
Okay. What do they make? United Technologies.
So, United Technologies is now Raytheon Technologies.
Okay.
Yeah. So RTX back then it was UTC.
Okay.
But so they were in everything. They owned Pratt Whitney back then, Sikorsky, Otis Elevator.
So parts manufacturing, like engine parts or
everything. I mean, so the stuff we manufactured in Pittsfield was fire and security systems. So life and fire safety devices.
Got it.
Everything from, the smoke detectors and, a large, 300 bedroom hotel all the way down to the panel that talks to it. So that's what we were doing there. But I think probably one of the most difficult things for me was, get in the paper industry. The, very, very, heavily union shop, right? Collective bargaining agreement. I had no experience with that. So that was a challenge just because I'm used to the world where, hey, if something needs to get done, we do it. Yeah. So understanding what that collective bargaining agreement actually said and, who can actually do what and what you can actually tell them to do when, it was a challenge. But what I did was I leaned on a lot of kind of those unofficial, leaders in the union, and they were able to teach me certain things, and really, increase my learning curve.
So what paper company were you with? Because I mean, I have a background. I am chemical engineering background.
Fraser Papers. Oh, yeah. Brookfield Asset Management bought them. Okay. Bought out the company. Yeah. And then we were going. I actually came on in a really pivotal moment. The company was going through creditor protection, and then they successfully. Well, the biggest hurdle, right, was getting the collective bargaining, the union, to take a pay cut during that time.
Which is always a challenge. It is. Yeah, take away bananas from anybody once they have it in their hand. It's very difficult.
And rightfully so, right? No one wants to take a pay cut.
100%.
But it was either that or we had to close down the facility.
Right. And this was Madawaska, right?
Yeah, Madawaska. Yeah. So we were able to do that. The union was very, collaborative during that time to do that. I mean, they did it, kind of kicking and screaming, but at the end of the day, they did the right thing for the small town that they were operating in. Right.
They knew the consequences of it. It wasn't a false alarm. It was essentially they realized this is the real deal. Like
So they successfully emerged from protection. Emerged as Twin Rivers Paper is what they're operating as today. Yeah. And the mill's still going on. It's still going strong. And this was 2009 timeframe.
One of the few mills, really. I mean, left.
Yeah, they're manufacturing specialty grade paper. Everything from the little packets of sugar and Equal and Splenda to the inside containers for Whoppers and Big Macs, the clamshell. So, but yeah, they're doing well, and I'm glad for them. I'm glad for the area.
For sure. I mean, it employs a lot of people, for sure. Yeah, no, I mean, that's part of my background, and even in New Brunswick, where I'm from, my father, essentially his career was at a paper mill, and so I'm very familiar with the challenges associated with trying to figure that out, and that realizing that you just can't call an electrician and say do this. No. It's not as simple as that. In fact, if you wanted to do something simple, you might have to have 3 different tradespeople coming in to do something that one person could very easily have done based on their skill set, but it's based on the restrictions of the union. You could not do it that way, which makes it tough to manage and really to maximize profitability as well, which is a challenge too. But so you're known for motivating teams to peak performance. What do you think most leaders get wrong about inspiring people?
So I think that there's a huge generational gap these days. The generation of individuals that are coming into the workforce now, they're motivated by different things. And I actually watched a pretty good podcast on it. And what they're saying is the the employees that are actually coming into the workforce now want to be engaged, right? They and whether you think that this is right or wrong is irrelevant,
Yeah,
right? It is what it is. That's right. Right. Yeah. They want to be challenged. They want to be involved, and they do want to be challenged. And for a lot of them, how your tone and tenor of your voice, right, could either one allow them to engage or they're just going to shut you off. And I see it sometimes with my own children, right? For sure. The days of just going around saying you better do it because I said so, in the workforce that's not going to work. Correct. Right. I think it does require a lot of coaching, mentoring. They need to know, it's that whole with them, what's in it for me. And again, whether we believe in that or not is another thing, but how you manage your workforce is, you have to at least take a look at that. A lot of different generational gaps that, guys like you and I probably, aren't familiar with. Right. But to be an effective leader, you need to study that and understand it.
And adapt. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure. I think that makes complete sense. Because I think what I've found is there's also a bit of a loyalty challenge too, and I think I don't know if you've experienced that in your own workforce, but the what's in it for me and some sort of a loyalty in terms of if an opportunity comes across over here that's just a small pay raise, the newer generation is more likely to see that as an opportunity to move. If
Yeah.
they,
the other thing too that if I remember correctly, the one thing too that this generation wanted or found is that in job satisfaction is actually what the company is doing, right? Mm-hmm. Is it saving the environment, or is it cutting the amount of plastics that this generation exactly, they seem to identify with that type of stuff. So that's another thing. It's communicating the message or the intent of the company very clearly, so that they can understand what it truly is.
Right. No, I think that's funny because even in the sports coaching, I mean, there's like the old school coaching style of yelling, screaming, telling you what to do and you better do it or else. Like it's the stick versus the carrot kind of scenario, and it's like, that may have worked in previous times, but to your point, I mean, if you want to be an effective leader now, you have to pull the team in. You have to communicate the whys. Why are we doing this? What's the bigger picture here? What's in it for you if you continue to do things right and effectively? Yeah. And then, to your point, constant coaching, constant mentoring. Yeah. But at what point do you get to when you realize? Because I think a lot of business owners and leaders find that they know that this might not be the right fit for this individual or lack of performance or whatever the case might be, but maybe trying to mentor and coach them beyond what instead of cutting that loose and finding the right person to fit that profile, someone that fits the intent of the company and wants to actually accelerate. So I don't know. Have you seen that? Have you experienced it? And how do you deal with it?
So, at some point, I think we as organizations, the organizations we run and manage, right? I think at some point you owe it to that employee to have a sit down conversation and say, hey, this may not be working out for you. Kind of the HR piece, right? Is, progressive discipline, right? We hate to always have to go there, but in order to protect, as business managers, we're protecting the company as well, right? 100%. So if an individual can't get it down pat after, a progressive approach to disciplining and it's not even really just disciplining, it's, mentoring, right? If they're not picking it up and they're not tracking, it's, you got to tell them, hey man, this may not be the right job for you,
Yeah. And have you gone through that? Yeah. And sometimes it may drag on a little longer than you'd want, trying to give more chances. And I think,
and that's the other thing, the other piece of leadership is that dichotomy of leadership, I guess. If you're allowing an individual to, fail, show up late, not performing, not pulling their weight, right? What's that say to the workforce that actually is? 100%. That's like one of the most demotivating things for the employees to see one of their peers getting away with, constantly getting away with failure or, not being disciplined accordingly,
Right.
and effectively managed out of the business.
Right. No, it's yeah, the lack of performance as other people are viewing it from the outside, seeing, and then as a leader, it takes up all that, like all the energy that you really as a leader are meant to lead and build and create a vision and direction for the organization. You're spending time with some underperforming individuals that are essentially detracting from all that. So yeah,
That's the Sergeant Wood answer.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So now the Vice President Derek Wood answer is,
Right.
we put a lot of time and money and effort into
Right.
one hire, trying to source a candidate or an individual, getting them trained, right, getting them through that whole pipeline, right, cost money.
Right.
You have all these indirect, functional support that are, HR, recruiting, to get all them established, just to get in the door.
Right.
When you look at that price tag, right, to try to get someone in the
It's
door,
wild.
it's crazy.
Mm.
Then once they get in the door, now you have to train them.
Right. They're not effective yet.
That's right.
They're not producing.
Right. So when you look at getting them from, A to Z through that whole pipeline of onboarding and then trained, and so that they're now effective, you want to try to salvage that individual as best you can,
100%.
because of the amount of sunk cost you have in that
2
person.
years typically, and 2 years besides all the besides the pay that they're getting and the benefits and so forth, all of the training, all of the outsourced activities that you're paying for. Yeah, no, it's a crazy cost, and I sometimes I think like the amount of effort that a lot of companies, or maybe the skipped effort that sometimes companies will bypass to try and bring someone in quicker than they would normally do. The cost associated with that is so high, because the reality is, really getting the right individual and maybe spending a little more effort and time on the upfront side versus spending 2 years of money, all the time that you're going to mentor and try and correct, and then finally end up cutting ties at some point after that, and then having to reset again. Yeah, that's a costly adventure. Yeah, yeah. So you've been responsible for top line growth, long range planning. How do you balance the big picture vision with just the gritty day-to-day tactical stuff?
Oh, geez, there's a good friend of mine, the last company I worked for, right? He had a term he used to use. It was called checking the traps, right? I've kind of adopted that in my day to day, and you're from Canada, right? There's a lot of folks in Maine that still run a trap line,
Right.
right? You put out a trap line, 20 traps, you have to check that trap line every day, right? There's no, you can't let it go, unless they're a certain type of trap, then I guess you can let them go a little bit longer, but I have to do that. When you're talking about growing the top line, managing your day to day, right, to gain efficiency on your P&L, you have to check the trap line, man. It's checking in with your customer, right, for new opportunities, new growth. Checking in with your project managers, or I have a deputy program manager that does a lot of assisting with me, and then again checking in with that functional support that actually are supporting your program. So every person I've talked to, probably in the last 3 years at least, that's the one thing when they're asking me, hey, would you mentor me on the side, whatever, I always talk to them about checking the traps. It does set you up for other positions later on, because now people are seeing that, okay, you're not just sitting, especially in this remote work environment.
Right.
It's hard to get FaceTime, right?
Big time. Yeah.
Long gone are the days of going to lunch with your colleagues
Right.
every day, like we used to,
100%.
going grabbing a cup of coffee, just having those sidebar conversations that help you or help them understand who you are as an individual.
Then they help you identify those traps too. Because as you're going out and you're talking, you have lunch with people, you're having all these side conversations, like, geez, this isn't working in this area, or this is not working, or, then you can identify the root cause, kind of dive in a little deeper, put a sub team together to identify that and fix it. But without any of that happening, it's hard to identify the traps, let alone go and fix them, But it's that whole remote thing is, there's pros and there's also cons to that model, and I think people are companies really are still trying to fine tune where is this perfect mix really, because there is benefit to having face to face. There's also benefit to the staff to have a little bit of freedom with your schedule too, by having remote work. But there is I think there is an optimal place to be. But so negotiations and expectation setting, or agreements are key strengths of yours. What's one negotiation mistake you see professionals make over and over?
You know, that's a good question because you know, when I think of negotiations, it could be a couple different things, right? Like I mentioned, the collective bargaining agreement that we had to renegotiate.
Right.
That could be a very touchy subject. You know, I think that a lot of times, you know, younger managers that don't know exactly how to articulate, you know, the value of certain things, right? So
Right.
anytime you can communicate value, right, that cost, right, whether it's an opportunity cost or a direct
Right.
cost or a sunk cost, that cost becomes very small. So I think that, you know, again, I refer back to that labor negotiation,
Right.
renegotiation there with Fraser in the Twin Rivers.
Right.
You know, the management staff of the you know, the mill did a good job on communicating the value that, you know, accepting this pay decrease. Again, no one likes to take a pay cut,
No.
but effectively communicating that, right, allowed the community to see the value.
Right. The big picture, long term, what's in it for us if we continue to yeah, right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. It's interesting that you know, um I mean that's if there's a complication or a complicated negotiation, I would say that would be one of them.
Yeah.
I mean, taking a group of tradespeople that are in a union and um, negotiating them to take a pay cut.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
I don't think it gets.
No.
Yeah, I don't think it gets. I mean, I'm trying to think. There's a lot of tough negotiations, but that is a tough one. I mean, it's hard because it's hard to for them to see a value. What's the what's in it for me value for me to take less money for doing the same task tomorrow that I did yesterday.
Right.
I'm not sure, but yeah, I think that's an interesting way to look at it. Looking ahead, what leadership habits or disciplines do you believe will separate successful leaders from everyone else over the next decade?
You know, I think there's a bit, you know, the big one for me, anyways, that I've kind of adopted is just staying healthy.
Mm.
The further up, you know, the ladder you move, the more dynamic you need to be, and you can't do that without maintaining your health, without staying healthy. You know, you're going to get run down. You're going to get tired quicker. So it's you know, when you look at things, the days of being, you know, as a frontline supervisor, you could sprint to each issue. That's not what this is anymore for me. Right?
Yeah.
It's a marathon now.
It's a marathon.
Yeah,
Sure.
I find myself having to travel a lot more.
Mhm.
You know, like I mentioned, we have an office down in Arlington, Virginia. So I'm traveling there, or I'm traveling to, you know, Iraq. Um, and then my wife and I, right, we have an assisted living home that we manage over in Dexter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
Nice.
I have embraced, you know, a very active lifestyle, but I've kind of tailored that with also embracing you know, very, you know, a level of fitness that I haven't in the past.
That's great.
Even when I was on active duty, things came
Right.
easier when I was on active duty because I was younger.
Right.
But I just turned 50
Right.
in August, and I need to make sure that I'm staying at the top of my
Different
game.
place.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's good. I mean, I think that I think more people. I think the one thing I always try and think back on is that you have all kinds of missions and visions and goals and ambitions. When you're healthy,
Yeah.
but when the body, the one thing that the mechanism by which you're able to do all this shit
Yeah.
happens to be not functioning, and then the only thing you think about is getting better. It's a sole focus on getting the body back in order, and I think a lot of driven business owners, entrepreneurs, executives like yourself, um, it, it, having an optimal. It's not even just like okay, it works, yeah, but working and working optimally are two different things. And so it can make a difference in your performance. And one of the things like I like to ask, when you're either an entrepreneur, an executive, someone like yourself, travel a lot, how is it that you're able to? What was it? 16 years married? No.
Yeah, married 16
Yeah.
years.
So how is it that you keep a marriage together and allocate time, have good relationships with your kids? You have a good, strong relationship with your wife. How do you accomplish that? And what are the challenges that you've seen and the sacrifices of high performance?
Yeah, so my wife and I, we have a goal, right? The goal is obviously retirement. Um, how we get there, get there from here is something that we talk about daily. It has to be, right? It's just like a annual review of your financial plan, or the CFO doing, some sort of financial review with your company. You have to do that together. So we know we try to keep our eye on the prize. It's again, it's get to retirement. Like I mentioned, we started an assisted living home company a couple of years ago. We're looking to scale that now, to kind of be the bridge between the end of our careers in our day jobs.
Right.
She's a nurse.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever that time comes to end these careers and then transition into that more, and then on into retirement, or maybe semi-manage those businesses and travel a little bit more later on.
Have some level of revenue and income coming in from your side business.
So yeah, so this job, especially early on when I got back into contracting in 2015, it was a lot of time away from a young family. My wife held down the fort for months on end while I was overseas, because I was doing a rotational thing at the time, working overseas for 3 months and then home for a month.
Okay.
So she held it down, but again, it's
tough.
Yeah, it was. And life is, our life didn't come without challenges either. Personal life. So we just made sure we held on together, and at the end of it, we, for the most part, have come through on the other side pretty successful.
Yeah, no, I listen. I mean, you beat the odds for sure. I just think, I always think like, so, and it's staying together is one thing, but then how do you, like, is there a way that you some tools, some strategies you use to, like, keep the spark alive? How do you, like, because it is one of those things where it's one thing. There's so many people that are married but unhappily married. Yeah, they're going through the motions. They're cohabitating and very transactional nature. And I always believe that there's a gift around having a marriage that's on fire, that you're passionate about. And I don't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I take a page out of my dad's playbook, right? Active duty, 20 plus years, and this is before like FaceTime and iMessage and even email, right? He's gone out to sea.
Letters.
Yeah, right. Letters.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Physical letters.
Yeah. But he would go out to sea for 6 months at a time.
Yeah.
Right. And there was, maybe a phone call here and there when they pulled in the port and, out of the Mediterranean or somewhere else. And I always knew, though, when my dad was home, right, it's because it's not about the quantity of time you're spending with your family, right? And I have a good friend that always asks, "What are you doing, man? Why are you going overseas? You chasing the money?" No, this is a passion I have. It's a calling, right? It's in my blood to do this type of work. He doesn't understand. He's actually a former Marine, but he doesn't understand my passion, my calling. Right. But it's not about the quantity of time being home, because I know many people that work 9 to 5, Monday through Friday jobs, and they can't stand each other.
You bet.
Right. Exactly. So it's not the quantity of time; it's the quality of time. So whenever I was home for that 30-day period, or when I was working down in Virginia for 10 days, coming home for a 4-day weekend, we did a lot of things as a family. Right. My wife and I still do date nights to this day, even though I'm working remote. It's either Friday or Saturday date night, or maybe even both. Because at the end of the day, it's her and I against the kids, right?
That's it. You got it. That's listen. The primary relationship is the man, the husband, and the wife. And I think that's some of the mistakes that I see people making, and including myself, is that sometimes either the couple will put the kids before the primary relationship, and those kids, they need, the best gift you can give your kids is a primary bond, a connected bond between the mom and dad. And I think that's. And I think you alluded on a couple things. So one thing for those of you that are listening, for the young men starting to build something big, when you're home, be present. I mean, I remember early days when I was, traveling a lot. I mean, I'm always on the phone. There's another deal coming in. There's another thing. And, half the conversations I didn't hear with my wife, or the kids would ask me things 3-4 times. And it degrades the relationship. And so if you're home, be present. Take the work stuff and do that in a focused environment where you're effective, and then turn it off, and then have date night once a week. I mean, like, prioritize dating your spouse or your wife once a week. Have it on the calendar. It's a non-negotiable. I love that. That's great. Yeah. So, a couple of final questions, but what do you want to be what do you want to be remembered for? Like when it's all said and done, and I know we both have some gray hair, but when it's fully gray,
I got a little
you got a little darkness there. So, yeah, what do you want to be? What do you want the legacy to be in the end? What do you want the?
Like I mentioned, my wife and I started this assisted living home company. The older I get, the more I just want to hang out with the elderly. The elderly probably have some of the best experiences that you can learn from and help guide you today, right? When I go to the home or assisted living home, it's not when I go there anyways, because I'm not on the clinical side or
Right.
You're
just the owner that comes and makes sure, comes and checks out your.
And I talk to them, about just anything, and you ask them about who they were back in the day, back when they were our age, what they did for a career, and you just see their face just change. It's they're reminiscing about who they once were, and it's great to sit there and hear the stories or hear about how this area used to be, a woolen mill, town, and or a paper town, or how Bangor used to be, and it's great, but I'd love to do that on a much larger scale.
Got it.
I don't know how much larger, right? It has to be comfortable, and if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense.
Right.
But I'd like to be known for the guy that was willing to provide a service where a service is needed. The silver tsunami hasn't even started to crest yet, with the baby boomers entering into the assisted living market. But when it comes, I think it's going to hit a lot of people off. It's going to take a lot of people off guard. It's going to hit people pretty hard, because there's a huge shortage of housing.
100% already. Before the wave, or we're in the early crest of the wave. But I mean, yeah, there's not enough supply.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. No, that's good. I think the wisdom that you can gain from, you can gain wisdom from everybody, but especially someone who's in their 70s or 80s and has lived an entire life. I mean, I think the one thing when in this lifetime, if you can find ways to compress time by taking the lessons from someone who's been through what you want to achieve, or maybe the challenges or hardships that they've experienced, and then they share it with you, and then you don't necessarily have to go through this trial and error thing. I mean, that's what's great about humans. If you want to be the most efficient and get the most out of your life, take those lessons and implement them into your life. Yeah. And then the last thing is, how do people find you? How do people locate you? I mean, I don't know if you're a big social media guy. Like, I don't even put your cell phone out here. Give me a call if you want an assisted living. I don't know, but
yeah. So my wife. So as far as the assisted living home is concerned, my wife and I do have a website.
Oh, you do?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's woodcrestcare.com.
Okay.
Again, we only have the one house. It's fully occupied right now. Yeah. But again, we're looking to scale that here presently. We're just trying to make sure we find the right home, because the type of care we want to provide, we want to do that in a residential setting, not a facility style setting, right? 6 residents max. We have read that that those simpler hometown residential, that feeling, gives the elderly a much better experience, right? Perfect. As they're aging, right? And we'd like for them to age in place, without any too many major issues, right? Yeah. But that's where we're at. Website is woodcrestcare.com, and then I'm also on LinkedIn.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks so much. It was great talking to you. Yeah. All right, thanks.
Thank you for watching and listening in. American Legacy is a production of Perfect Fit USA. Copyright 2025 by Perfect Fit USA. To learn more about Perfect Fit and the Perfect Fit family of companies, please visit perfectfitusa.com.